How many of you remember buying your first car? Was it the freedom that you loved most about it, or was it just the ability that you had to just go wherever you wanted to without having to ask mom or dad? Why should college be any different? Yet there are some colleges who tend to be overprotective of their students, or maybe it is that they don't trust their students. BYU-I, or Brigham Young University, Idaho, is one such school. The policy at BYU-I is that all students have to live in BYU-I approved housing while attending school. My purpose in presenting this speech today is to help you see how allowing BYU-I students to live on their own would not only be beneficial for the students themselves, but it would of course be beneficial to the local community of Rexburg, Idaho. I've spent a significant amount of time going through research in preparation for this speech, and I am ready to help you see why such a policy change is in the best interest of the BYU-I students and in the Rexburg community. There are two main problems that are created because BYU-I forces their students to live in approved housing. The first problem is for the students. Students at BYU-I are forced to live in designated apartment complexes that are pre-approved by the school, which means that the owners of these student-approved housing rentals can have a monopoly on it. They control that monopoly, and they can raise the rent prices, and students are forced to pay it with no recourse about moving to a different place or finding a cheaper rent because the owners control the monopoly on it. And students don't get to call the place their own either. They don't get to rearrange, they don't get to adjust the room, they don't get to bring their own furniture. It's all just there. They don't have control over their roommates. They don't get to say, I don't like this one, I don't like this one. They don't get to meet them or have any idea of who they are. They just show up and the roommates are there. Students must also submit to a weekly cleaning check from the apartment managers. How would you like it if someone inspected your bedroom on a weekly basis to make sure that it was clean? That'd be pretty invasive, right? The second problem is that BYU-I approved housing presents a problem for the community of Rexburg, Idaho. When local families want to move to Rexburg, there are no available apartments to rent because most of the apartments in Rexburg are already designated for single BYU-I students, and the renters won't rent to anyone else. So BYU-I approved housing is taking away housing from the local community of Rexburg. With these problems in mind, the best thing the university can do to mitigate and combat these problems is to completely do away with approved housing. This would allow students to be their own individuals and to have a space that they could call home while still at school. Students would no longer have to pay rent prices. They could find something that was in their budget. In an article written by Dallin Vick and published by the BYU-I Scroll, he writes, quote, "If BYU-I released students from housing restrictions, students could see better prices as competition between apartment owners would increase. Currently, competition is open to only the selected complexes that BYU-I approves," end quote. Further evidence for why BYU-I should allow students to live on their own comes from an article written by Danesville, entitled, "What are the advantages of living off campus?" The article says, quote, "Living off campus is cheaper than living in on-campus dorms. Many college students are on a budget and need to be selective as to where they spend their money. If funds are tight, there are a number of options to live off campus in apartments that fit your budget," end quote. In addition to all of that, the school would no longer be limited by the number of spots available for the approved housing. Each student would be responsible for finding housing for themselves. In an article written by Davisville, that same article, it says, quote, "Living on your own instills a sense of responsibility and maturity. Keeping up on your studies, maintaining a job, paying bills on time, and upkeep on your household are excellent skills to have in adulthood and will be tremendous value as you transition from school to a new career, end quote. And finally, more people in the community would just be able to have a place to live without being in competition to the BYU-I students. The counter argument for why students should continue to live in BYU-I approved housing is pretty simple, actually. In an article published by the Deseret News announcing a policy change at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, BYU Life student Vice President Julie Franklin said, quote, "Research repeatedly shows that students who live on campus with their fellow students have a better and more successful college experience," end quote. In addition to that, some might argue that one of the best things about approved housing is that all of the amenities are taken care of. The students don't have to bring any furniture, beds, couches, TVs. They don't have to bring any of that because it's already provided. And the rent is generally somewhere in the range of where someone can afford that's typically in college. However, as we read from the Daytonville article, having one's own apartment would help provide a sense of responsibility and provide a form of education that would otherwise be unavailable to other students who lived in approved housing or on-campus housing. Now that we see what the solution is, let's kind of look at the results of it. If we don't make the necessary changes for housing at BYU-I, fewer students will be able to attend the school because the available approved housing program will be full. Rent prices will continue to go up and students will continue to be forced to pay it. The community of Rexburg will continue to face housing problems because there will be nowhere for local families to live because it will all be given to the BYU-I students. If we do make these changes, the owners of the rentals will make more money because it won't just be students that live in their housing, it will be other local families with better incomes and better adjustments. More students will learn responsibility and gain a piece of an education that would otherwise be unavailable to them if they lived in approved housing. And students will be able to have a wide variety of housing to live in that will be available to them for what they have, for what they need. So what can you do to help the BYU-I student community and the local community of Rexburg? What can you do to help them be independent and to have their own space? You can give them the opportunity to live where they want in a price range that works for them. And the thing that you can do to help ensure that is to send an email to Amy LeBeau, who is the BYU-I Student Life Vice President, and encourage her to take steps to do away with BYU-I approved housing. Thank you.